And we're getting closer. We're to the point now where we can start putting in a few more details. And so I'm going to go back to my pencil and make sure that I draw those details in. I drew right here where the strap is. You got to finish putting that strap in. We're going to leave his ear exposed a little bit, and then we're going to cut some hair in here. We're going to add some details here. We'll add little details on a few more spots. Bottom of the boot, I want to draw an area for, what do they call that? The tread or lugs, I guess some people call them, depending on the type of boot. We want to draw that in because we're going to put in some little V-tool marks in there that'll make it look more like a boot bottom. We'll trim this sharp edge right here to make it look more rounded so it's like socks. Go back and do some cleanup. I want to put my thumb in here. If this guy has a thumb, let's assume it comes up here like this and sort of curls down a little bit. If you'll take your finger and do your thumb like that and imagine a stick being gripped in there, you can see how that thumb kind of comes over. So we don't have to draw every detail of the thumb, fingernail, and everything else. We just got to give the impression that that thumb comes over that stick. Let me zoom in here just a little bit more. There we go. And so when we do that, we look at the hand gripping the stick, and I'm going to make sure that hand clears the stick, but not by a whole lot. I don't need a whole lot of room out there. I just need to get the indication of fingers curling around the stick. And so when we do hands, one of the easiest things I find to do is to divide it in half. Because if you look at your hand, when you curl it, you've got 4 fingers. Divide that in half. It runs down the center line between the ring and the middle finger. So there's that line. It makes it easier to split the other 2 in half. I can do that one in half and that one in half. And then when I curl around, most of the time you aren't curling and all those 4 fingers are lining up just like that. Usually you're going to curl and grab something and the fingers kind of slide off. And so this little one is back here. If you look at it, again, it's a relief carving, and so it doesn't have to come very far over. Then the other one comes up a little bit farther. The ring for the middle finger, and then the other one is hidden back in here. And so we'll draw those fingers, and we've got to relieve all this down to where the stick is down there. So we've got a thickness there that we don't want and a thickness over here that we don't want. So we'll take that off. We'll see how far we can get today. Put your glove on. Put your safety gear on. Always, always important to get that safety gear on every single time. Because I don't know about you, I'm not crazy about going to the emergency room today. Okay, we'll put the example aside. Let's work on that hand a little bit. I'm going to cut off that part right there. Let me get a stiffer knife. Leave yourself a little bit of extra there so that you can play around with that. And then I'm going to take a V-tool and I just want to outline that thumb because I'm going to cut these lines off. Where the fingers are, and so I just want to make sure I have given myself enough room to do that. I'm going to reach down in my bag and I'm going to grab my file gouge. It says 7, and this is one of the things that I have an issue with. I'll zoom in here a little bit. I don't know if you can see that, but right there, that number 7. When it says 7 right there, and we look at how a gouge is made and how a gouge is labeled, Gouges range from a flat chisel, which is a 1, all the way to a 180-degree turn, which is an 11. And so the 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way to 11 are different amounts of curling. So a 2 would be a little bit more, a 3 would be a little bit more, on and on until you get to the 11. And so for when File says that this is a number 7, I would think it'd have more curl than a number 1 or a number 3. And so I grabbed this fishtail gouge by Drake, and it's almost fairly straight across. I would call that anywhere between a 1 and a 2. And so you go to something else, and some of these don't put numbers on them. Drake doesn't put numbers on theirs. There's one that's probably about an 8 or 9. So there's a big difference between this 7 and whatever this one is. That doesn't look like it has much of a sweep to the tool itself, and I don't understand where that comes from. And so if I grabbed another tool that had one, here's a flex cut, again, doesn't have the number attached to it. Here's a Stubai, and this Stubai says it's 11 because if you can see that, it goes almost 180 degrees from one ear to the other. So if this is 11, I'm going to assume that one should be about a 9. I'm going to assume this one's about a 6 or 7. And so if I look at 7s, different brands, I don't make tools, so I don't understand how those numbers go, but I just look at the chart that says what the sweep is, and I'm confused when I look at that number 7 and this number 7 here. Anyway, I'm going to use this File number 7 because it has almost a flat profile to it, and I don't need much. I just need a little bit. This is the smallest number 7 that I have, and so what I want to do is I want to relieve this finger area. So I'm going to make a stop cut. Let me put my marks in here so I know where my stop cut is. So I'm going to make a stop cut right along the edge of that line. Just going to lay that flat down, and I'll just push in. And I'm not going in very deep, but I'm going in deep enough so that I can get that out of there. So I'm going to take that number 7 again, and I'm just going to take off that wood. I essentially have to go all the way down to the stick. And so as I do that, let me use a bigger tool, a little easier to get in there. As I do that, what I'm doing is removing wood between the fingers and the body. And this is the wood that would, or rather, this is the space that would be the stick. And so if we look here, the stick is going up here. It's going to go right along here as well. So we'll just nibble a little bit of wood out of there, cut that wood out, make sure that we're in the right spot, get all that out of there. And we'll continue lowering that, and then we'll shape the fingers around it. We want those fingers to not look like they're sticking out in space. We want to make them look like they're holding onto that stick. So you can see that we're almost there. We've got that little cut right there we've got to navigate. And in reality, if we're doing this realistically, the stick is going to have some space left to it right there. So we will need to take out that wood right there. So I'm going to make a stop cut right there along the edge of that stick up to the hand, and I know that that part right there has to come out. So one of the easiest ways, if I can't get in there with my number 7, I can get into part of it. I'm going to make a stop cut on the side of the jacket so that when I cut in there I can get some of that out. I'll try it with this tool. Yeah, get a little bit of it, but not quite all of it. Almost. And so now we've embedded that stick behind, or the fingers in front of the hand and the stick behind the hand. Do a little bit of cleanup here and allow me to embed the jacket back up under that collar. And then I can take more wood off right in this area. I want to embed that finger like it's coming out at an angle. So I'm going to push it back behind the jacket. And then I'll clean that up right there and clean up down in here. So it looks like the hand's coming out from somewhere behind that jacket. And in fact, I'm going to just take a little bit more off of there. And then what I'm going to do is now start to shape that hand. So I don't want the hand to have that sharp edge there. I'll take that off. And considering the fact that these fingers are going to be below that thumb, I can go ahead and do that with a stop cut. So I'm just going to go around the thumb, around the parts where I've cut in the thumb. And then as a stop cut, I can take off those pieces of wood. Be real careful, make sure you're in control of where your knife is, because you don't want to cut off that thumb. We've built ourselves a little extra space, and so we can take that off if we accidentally make a mistake. But you know, if you don't have a mistake to make, don't make it. You can always do a lot of these things without making a mistake. And in this case, we're going to try not to. So I got the thumb sticking out over the hand, over the fingers. We'll trim those fingers. We don't want sharp edges here or here. And so we're going to make sure that we don't have sharp edges on any part of this hand. So we'll round that. And we'll round it up here a little bit more, because as you can tell, the fingers are not sufficiently embedded behind the thumb. So we'll take a little bit more off. We don't need real thick fingers to give the impression that the fingers are grasping that stick. We just need a little bit of sticking out. So what we're going to do, continue to nibble that away, little at a time. Okay, as I said in one of the earlier videos, when you take off a line, draw it back on, and we're going to do exactly that. And so here we have, again, halfway would give you 2 fingers and 2 fingers below that. And so if we draw that all the way around here, we can now take our V-tool. We don't need to go too deep. Be careful how you're carving. If you're carving this way, you're probably going to take off some slices. I'm going to carve into the wood as long as I can. So I'm just giving the impression of the fingers, the spaces between the fingers there. And I'm just using a V-tool to do that. Get the right angle so I'm not pushing the wrong wood out. I'm not pushing the wrong way. And I'm not getting my gouge below the level of the ears, which I did on that first cut. So I'll have some cleanup there to do too. Not a problem. I'm going to take care of that saw cut right there. It's been bothering me for a while. I just haven't worked my way around it. I'm just taking that saw cut out that I had put in there when we cut the stick out. Okay. Now these sharp edges here and here, we'll just trim those. Oh, another saw mark right there we'll take care of. There we go. And what we're going to do is just trim that edge off. So we got an edge there. Reverse it because we don't want it to split off at the end. All we're doing is just trimming that down so it looks more realistic in terms of the geometry of the hand. We don't have very many 90 degrees on the hand in terms of how the shape of it is. So we just want to give it that impression. Now what we have to do is right here on the fingers, we have to make sure that each one of these fingers are sort of rounded. A couple of ways to do that, but the easiest way to do that is just to use a knife. We'll make a stop cut right there. Another stop cut right there. And what we want to do to make it look like it's rounded, we'll take off a chip right there. And a chip right there. You can see how that looks a little more rounded than it did when it was just cut off straight. Okay, We do the same thing on both of those, all the other fingers, as long as we can. The pointy finger, the index finger, does not have a space out here for us to do that. So we're just going to worry about the 3 fingers that are showing. I'm going to grab my little brush. See if we can't whisk some of those fuzzies out of there so that you can get a good idea of what's in there. So now you see those fingers there. And you could argue for rounding this out here, but it's a little level of a detail that I'm not going to worry too much about. No one's going to come up and look at my carving and say, well, you didn't round that right there. I'm not going to worry too much about it. And if they do, I'm going to hand them a knife and a piece of wood and have them show me how it's done. And then if they know how to do it, then I'll invite them into our club. Ha! Anyway, just clean this up a little bit. We'll make sure that finger kind of looks like fingers. And again, another detail that we're adding to this carving. Got his hand there. We're going to shape that stick now because we've got saw marks out here. But now we're going to give it some kind of rounded contour. And don't be too particular about this, and don't get too gung-ho about it. It's basically a stick that the guy picked up out of the woods or has been taken with him for a while. So he's going to just use it, and over the course of the years it's going to get used and bent and weathered, and so it doesn't have to look like a perfectly flat stick or perfectly round. It can be undulating, it can be twisted. He could have one of those diamond willow walking sticks where it has all those diamond facets in there and twists and turns. And so we're just trying to make this look like some kind of stick in there. Now I need to have to navigate that line again in there. So I'm going to cut it and then come back in here with a flexible knife and see if I can't peel it out of there. Peel that little sliver out right there. And call it good. Anyway, we're at 17 minutes. I'm going to have to slow this one down because it'll take forever to load up. We'll go ahead and stop now and pick it up on the next video. See you then.